have been there to advise the government, and they've been demolished at every turn. And in 2017, out at Uluru, the Aboriginal leadership I got to be with, and those incredible people who are community people, who weren't the ones that you see, like me, now on TV. They're not writing the opinion pieces. These were community people who said, we're absolutely voiceless in our own communities. We're voiceless in this space. And they said, we need something that is not going to be taken away at a change of government.
But you look in my community, for instance, my community in Western Sydney was one of the communities most impacted by early colonisation in outskirts of Western Sydney because of the way the lands were stripped back at the time. But with the way New South Wales native title works, the Darug people don't exist in New South Wales native title, which means that the voice will either go to Darubbin or you'll go to Eora because Darug are getting wiped out. So there's a whole range of things that in some Aboriginal communities, you know, things like that native title piece in New South Wales should be rectified because those communities are going to be...
That's another thing.
I think that raises the complexity.
It is another thing, but who gets the voice and how does that actually go through? Because from somebody from Darug country, I want to see the Darug elders and the descendants of people like Yarramundi and Colby to have a voice as well.
I think that also exposes some challenges around that piece of legislation and its iterations.
But if Albanese had have waited, he could have fixed some of these pieces.
Or maybe they need to be worked on independently. Peter, I want to bring you in because a lot of discussion around the opposition leader putting a second referendum on the table just for recognition, as we've heard. So if next month's referendum fails, what happens next? What does that mean in terms of what we know from the politicians so far?
Well, it's 24 years since the Republic referendum failed, so maybe we won't see anything. I do, by the way, I shouldn't be flippant about it, but the worst thing ever to happen for the No campaign since Albanese stood next to Alan Joyce on a Qantas plane, outside a Qantas plane
for the Yes campaign, you mean?
Yeah, the worst thing to happen, but the worst thing to happen to a leader happened to Dutton when he said, in a land of compulsory voting, if you vote no, I'll give you another referendum. I don't exactly think that was a winner. But more seriously, can I just address the point that Tony Abbott made, you know, aside from his unfortunate remarks, perhaps about two great Australians. The point he made was that representation won't fix this, money will fix this. And I think we've now reached the point where we know that's not right. Australia has spent so much money on Aboriginal affairs, right? For a long time, because Australians want to, and that hasn't improved things as much as you would think. And all of the research shows that if you give people a feeling that they are, that it's their decisions, that they're not being imposed on them, it's not, you know, the kind of housing and so on we had built, with a lot of money wasted in the intervention and so on, dictated from outside, that is what helps. Now, me, an economist, saying that money isn't everything, well, it's not. A sense of empowerment is important as well, and maybe, I don't know if it'll work, but it'd be good if it did. Maybe The Voice will help in that.
Harry, you posted on social media recently about The Voice. Tell me what happened.
Yeah, I posted on social media saying that I was voting yes and my reasons as to why I was voting yes. And I don't particularly like to read too many comments on my posts, and I got, I think, 1,500 comments. The comment box was just everyone debating about yes, no, why they're voting. And it's such a politically charged conversation. And it almost like highlights the system we have now. And I do get the system is amazing. We live in a great country. But it's like if the left is saying one thing, the right has to almost say the opposite. And I feel like it would just be so much more amazing. It's like if the left come up with a really good idea of like, okay, this is how we're going to attack or address this issue, and the right were like, actually, I can see some really valuable things in that. And I feel like that never happens in politics, and it's so frustrating. I think this is just highlighted now.
Dana, I just want to bring you in to round us out before we wrap up this section. You and I have been doing a lot of reporting, working in tandem on this across lots of the ABC coverage. I just wonder, what are your observations about where we're at in the campaign over this next 4 or 5 weeks?
I think we're in an incredibly interesting point in the campaigns, Dan. The phrase ramping up has been used more than a few times over the last 15 months. It must be an incredibly narrow incline on that ramp, but they'll continue to ramp up over the next 5 to 6 weeks as we head towards October 14. We know what the Yes campaign are doing. They're activating community volunteers. Last count I heard, they had around 30,000 community volunteers around the country and collecting more every day. They're hitting the train stations and the tram stops and doing that one-to-one, person-to-person campaigning, which I think people are crying out for in this, because what I've heard from your panel tonight, this is an incredibly contested issue and people aren't across the facts. And the politicians aren't really delivering them. They're delivering their party lines, but they're not delivering the simple answers that people want to know. And that's going to fall to the campaigners, I think, out there on the streets. We know what Yes are doing. No, not so much. We don't really know what they plan to do in terms of community-based or person-to-person campaigning, or whether there will be rallies, whether there'll even be a launch.